I am on the precipice, the cusp of 30 years of age. And I found that 30 years of age is a really good period to take inventory and take stock of your life and to be able to critically adjudicate where you've come from, where you've been, who you are, who you were, and where you want to go, your future. I'm finding that I'm feeling a sense of existential dread and terror about the future. Everything feels really precarious and uncertain. I'm starting to realize that everything has felt very precarious and uncertain and unstable. But that feeling has only grown more acute. And I think maybe it's just like as a child, you can be sort of oblivious to some of those things. You're kind of insulated. But as an adult, there's there's no protection from that. There are no blinders. So I really wanted to take the time to create a video about being black, being male, and being set up to fail. So I'm not really gonna corroborate or validate or verify or substantiate any of what I'm about to say with any qualitative or quantitative evidence. This is really mainly just going to be like purely anecdotal. And I'm looking between the screen or whatever because recording with I'm recording with my phone. Also, I don't really have like a trajectory or a guideline of where I want to go, but I just have like specific bullet points that I would like to elaborate on in terms of the different regions and where you might find this phenomena of being set up to fail. So the first region I'm going to start with is family. I also want to preface this by saying that I know not all families are the same. Not all families have the exact same type of dynamic. Not all families are founded upon dysfunction and trauma and chaos and entropy and emotional discord and all of those awful horrific things. But quite a few are. I definitely thought I will not mince my words and say that mine definitely was. I definitely had like a lot of traumatic things that happened to me that have had a debilitating effect on my trajectory, on my ability to self-actualize, on my ability to navigate and pivot through life. The one thing that I do understand and accept though as an adult is that you have to take responsibility irrespective of if this happened to you or this didn't happen to you. You have to take responsibility for where you are right now and what you're feeling. And if you are dealing with the repercussions and the ramifications of something that happened back then, the onus and the burden of responsibility is on me to rectify and remedy it as best as I possibly can. It sucks ish in a way. It sucks ish in a way that I have to take responsibility for something that wasn't necessarily my fault. But it is that's just that's just the way it is. That's just the way this life goes. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. So yeah, when it comes to family specifically, I grew up with a single black mom, and I know that that is the story of a lot of black men across the world. Now that is an entirely separate discussion when it comes to absentee black fathers. And I know also, like, I'm not going to generalize and say that all black men immediately shirk their parental responsibilities and duties, because I have had peers who were involved in their sons and daughters' lives. They were married to their wives and whatnot, what have you, and were part of a nuclear household. So I know that this is not. It's just you can't make a sweeping statement about that. It's not something that you can just generalize or use to paint a scarlet letter across black men across the world. But I feel like it's hard for black people already. It's hard for us already. And then when a black man does not have the he doesn't have a positive male role model, someone to sort of show him the ropes, and someone who can set an example of what a man should be and what a man is supposed to be, what a man is supposed to aspire to. Of course, when you have a woman who she's by herself, she's stressed out to the nth degree, she can barely, she's trying to make ends meet. She doesn't have the wherewithal or the capacity to preside. Her priority is to make sure that food is on the table. She might not have the bandwidth to think about the emotional well-being or to think about the other needs that aren't being met for all of her children. There are specific sort of set list of things that she needs to accomplish, And so some things might fall by the wayside. I think for me personally, it's like, okay, cool. So I don't have a dad and I don't have like an older sort of male role model growing up who can guide me and sort of help me to telegraph what my next step should be as a black man. And it's just like, okay, cool. Now it's like, now as an adult, I really see how that was catastrophic because I'm very much, for the most part, left to my own devices. And as a black man who was a black boy that grew up in Peckham, it was very perilous and pestilential. Of course, I didn't get into the whole gang stuff and any of that, but I very easily could have. And I definitely feel like there's just a lack of vigilance and there's a lack of vigilance and there's a lack of urgency. There's a lack of seriousness around the fact that it's very easy to be swept up and radicalized and to be inculcated into these destructive things, into these things that can sort of sweep you up so incontrovertibly and put you on a trajectory that you're not supposed to be on. I don't think anybody wants to live a life of crime and, or being a vagabond or being a reprobate or being a crimp. Nobody really sets out to live that type of a destructive, chaotic life. But it definitely feels like, as a black man, when you're birthed into this world, society in particular wants you to either be subjugated, imprisoned, emasculated, or a weird combination of the above or something, but definitely not to be empowered, not to be celebrated, not to be uplifted, because that would be too much. I've seen it with my own two eyes and I've experienced it with my own two eyes. I think of great men, great black men like Patrice Lumumba, MLK, Malcolm X, oh, and several others, of course, but specifically like someone like Patrice Lumumba. And I'm just thinking, now, I'm not saying that these men were infallible, and I'm not saying that these men were faultless or spotless. No one is. We're all sinners. We're all sinners. But I do feel like these men exemplify the central thesis of this video, in that these were black men who wanted to uplift and advocate for the progression of black people across the world, or progression of black people, period, right? And were stopped because that was too inconceivable an idea. It was too unthinkable an idea. And they were stopped, they were eliminated, they were taken out. And I just feel like it's just like something that I feel is a phenomena that happens on a more minute, more minuscule level for black men across the world in some way, shape, or form. Now, we're not all getting eliminated and assassinated en masse, however you pronounce that word, but there are there are a myriad of machinations at play on a daily basis, systemically, culturally, politically, that are arrayed against us, set up to and fashioned to impede us, quell and curb or derail our trajectories entirely. Now, when it comes back to family, so it's like, so from my own perspective, coming from a black, being a child of a first generation immigrant, the other thing that I wanted to address is how, from that specific cultural context, we are not given the knowledge or a heads up about the machinations that are at play. There was a comment that I read on a forum that I frequent. You may know of that forum, you may be familiar with that forum. I will not divulge and disclose the identity of that forum, but anyways, and a user said, paraphrasing, that the police are chomping at the bit to take them out, them being black men. And that, honestly, that statement really got me. It rattled me, it disarmed me, because the fact of the matter is, it's the truth. It's the truth. Now, I know that even though I'm a black man, I'm still a man, and that entitles me and accords me to a whole host of privileges and luxuries. I definitely feel like, if we want to think about, demographics that are the most oppressed, disenfranchised, that are the most hated and castigated and persecuted by the world, I definitely feel like black women are at the top. They are at the apogee of this. But of course, that's a separate video or a separate discussion, and I'm not talking about that specifically. That me being a man entitles me to certain, accords me to certain incontrovertible privileges and benefits. I benefit by virtue of me being a male from the patriarchy and by what the patriarchy entails. I know that. But I'm also black. Okay. I'm also black. I'm also a black man. And there is a nuance there. There is an intersection there. It kind of balances as something gets balanced out or something gets invalidated in that privilege. It's like, okay, on the one hand, you're a man and you benefit from these things to a certain degree. But on the other hand, you're black. On the other hand, you come from a disadvantageous socioeconomic background. On the other hand, you don't have a dad in the house. On the other hand, you have a mum who doesn't really have the know-how or isn't really savvy about the different dangers that are in the world, that are in the streets of inner city London, out to get you. And you're essentially again left for DEAD. And on family, just to close family up, I also wanted to say is like, something that can really make or break a child is how much approbation and validation they receive whilst they're growing up. One thing that I've learned as an adult is that so much of who we are as adults can be attributed to what we are exposed to or what happened to us as children. I think everyone knows that. That's like basic human psychology. These foundational, pivotal, critical experiences help to cultivate the type of person, help to establish the type of trajectory that you'll have going forward. And I feel like black children in general, not just black boys or black children in general, I feel like parents, especially West African parents, have a serious issue when it comes to positive reinforcement, when it comes to encouragement and praise, when it comes to just telling you, job well done. Just a simple job well is like pulling teeth. Now again, that's a whole nother, but it still sort of dovetails back. It's like, there are so many different levels. You don't have this, so you don't have an example of what you're supposed to aspire to. Nobody's instilling within you the belief that you can aspire to become something, period. And then there's also the fear of the outside world, a world that would sooner discard you, devalue you, or a world that also covets you and wants to fetishize you, but also wants to remove you and displace you at the same time. So many things. Anyways, that's the family segment done. Next, I'm going to be moving on to society.